For 6 years, Marcus drove the same reliable but unremarkable sedan. Nobody looked twice when he pulled into a parking lot. Nobody looked twice at him either. Then he bought a car that changed absolutely nothing about who he was, and somehow changed almost everything about how he was treated. He hadn't planned on buying anything flashy. A slightly used luxury sedan came up at a price that finally made sense, and he decided, after years of driving something purely practical, to get something he actually liked looking at. He was still the same person behind the wheel. Same job. Same income. Same personality. The only thing that had changed was the exterior of the vehicle he happened to be sitting in. The first difference showed up almost immediately, at a restaurant valet stand he had used dozens of times before in his old car. In his old car, the valet had always been polite but brief, quick to take the keys and move on to the next vehicle. In the new car, the same valet suddenly asked about the model, complimented the color, and handed him a ticket with what felt like genuine enthusiasm. At a clothing store the following weekend, Marcus noticed something else. A salesperson who had walked past him without much acknowledgement on previous visits suddenly appeared within seconds, offering help, asking questions about what he was looking for. He realized, standing there, that the salesperson had likely seen him pull into the lot. The car had already told a story before Marcus said a single word inside the store. None of these people actually knew anything true about Marcus, his character, his habits, or his values. They were responding entirely to a signal his car was sending before he ever opened his mouth. At a family gathering a few weeks later, his car became the center of conversation almost immediately. An uncle who rarely asked Marcus much about his life spent 20 minutes asking detailed questions about financing, mileage, and resale value. Marcus later admitted, half joking and half genuinely reflecting, that the car had generated more sustained curiosity from that side of the family than most of his actual life updates over the previous several years combined. At work, a coworker who Marcus rarely spoke with beyond routine greetings mentioned, almost in passing, that he had noticed the new car in the parking garage, and asked, half serious, whether Marcus had gotten a raise nobody else had heard about. He hadn't. His salary was exactly the same as it had been the month before. Only the car had changed, and yet somehow that single detail rearranged an assumption about his entire financial situation. A friend who had recently started dating again mentioned something similar when Marcus described what he'd been noticing. She said she had once watched a date's entire demeanor shift the moment he saw what car she drove up in, more attentive, more engaged, in a way that felt oddly tied to the vehicle rather than to her. This pattern rarely stays limited to strangers. Research on social perception consistently shows that visible markers of status, cars very much included, shape how quickly people extend trust, attention, and even basic courtesy, often within seconds and often without the person doing the judging realizing they are doing it at all. Even at his regular mechanic, someone who had serviced his old car for years without much conversation beyond the basics, Marcus noticed the tone shift slightly, a bit more attentiveness, a bit more explanation offered without being asked. None of these shifts reflected anything true about Marcus's character, his kindness, his intelligence, or his actual financial situation. They reflected assumptions people made instantly based on a single visible signal. Marcus said the experience left him with a strange, uncomfortable clarity. He had not become a more worthy person the week he bought that car. He had simply become a more assumed one. He started testing it, almost as an experiment, taking his partner's older, more modest car to the same stores and restaurants he had recently visited in his own. The shift in treatment reversed itself almost exactly, confirming what he already suspected. It genuinely was never about him specifically. It was about whatever story a stranger's brain quickly, automatically told itself based on the vehicle sitting in front of them. Interestingly, the people who knew Marcus well, his closest friends, his siblings, his actual close relationships, treated him exactly the same as they always had. The car meant nothing to people who already had real information about who he actually was. The shift in treatment only ever showed up with people who had no other information to go on, strangers, acquaintances, service workers meeting him for the first time. The less someone actually knew him, the the more the car seemed to speak on his behalf. He even noticed it at his own bank, applying for an auto loan on a separate matter. A loan officer who had processed his paperwork with polite efficiency in the past spent extra time discussing other financial products once the new car was mentioned in casual conversation. The uncomfortable truth this experience revealed was simple. People are constantly making rapid, often unconscious judgments based on visible signals, and a car happens to be one of the most immediate and universally understood signals available. Marcus said this changed how he thought about the assumptions he made about other people too, wondering how often he had unconsciously done the exact same thing to someone else based on what they drove, wore, or carried. The deeper lesson here has little to do with cars specifically. It is a reminder that the way the world treats you often says far more about the world's assumptions than it says about your actual worth. Your value was never actually parked in a driveway. It was there the entire time, whether or not anyone else noticed it before you drove up.